Good morning again. Hear the word of the Lord, O nations. Proclaim it in distant coastlands. He who scattered Israel will gather them, and will watch over his flock like a shepherd. For the Lord will ransom Jacob and redeem them from the hand of the stronger than they. They will come and shout for joy on the heights of Zion. They will rejoice in the bounty of the Lord. The grain, the new wine, and the oil, the young of the flocks and herds, they will be like a well-watered garden, and they will sorrow no more. And maidens will dance and be glad, young men and old as well. I will turn their mourning into gladness. I will give them comfort and joy instead of sorrow. I will satisfy the priest with abundance, and my people will be filled with my bounty, declares the Lord. Jeremiah chapter 31, verses 10 through 14. Let's pray. Father God, we thank you for your redeeming work. God, for your sacrifice. And God, we know that then calls us to live in a new way, God, in a different way. And so, God, may we hear your words this morning. May they inspire us, may they challenge us, may they change, God, something within us that leads us closer to you and leads us to call others closer to you. God, we thank you. It's in your Son's name we pray. Amen. As we think about things, we remember the sacrifice that was done on our behalf, and we remember all that Jesus did for us. And along that, I'd like to invite you to turn to our scripture reading, Romans chapter 5. When we think about what Jesus did for us, when we think about, as it says, at just the right time, the sacrifice that was done on our behalf, the sacrifice that was done with a purpose in mind. That as we remember that, as we pay homage to that, we also know that leads us to live in a new way. Noah Webster said, the dictionary guy, said, we should never sacrifice health to pleasure or integrity to fame. We should never sacrifice health to pleasure nor integrity to fame. And as we think about the sacrifice that was done for us, we know that then from our understanding of this, that Jesus calls us out of a way of living and into a new way of living. Out of one way and into something new. And so when we look at this, we think about this, he says we should never sacrifice health to pleasure, nor integrity to fame. Romans chapter 13, verse 7 says, give to everyone what you owe them. If you owe taxes, pay taxes. If revenue, then revenue. If respect, then respect. If honor, then honor. As we think about these words, it speaks to giving people what they are worthy of receiving, what they are deserving of receiving, what we are called to give to them. And when we think about the sacrifice for us, of what Jesus did on the cross for us, we honor him in such a way. We give him respect in such a way. We give back to him in such a way. And so with that, I want to talk about, out of this sacrifice, kind of 10 radical sayings of Jesus. 10 radical sayings of Jesus. Another quote for you to hear, Martin Luther King Jr. said, and I love this, says, when you are right, you cannot be too radical. When you are wrong, you cannot be too conservative. I love this because sometimes it comes down to, when people ask me, well, are you conservative? Are you progressive? Are you liberal? And I'm like, well, compared to who? Because sometimes that's really what it boils down to is who is the comparison? Who is that which we are placing ourselves up against to define who we are? Because for some, like Martin Luther King said, when you are right, you cannot be too radical. Right? How radical can you be if you're right about something, and if you're wrong, you cannot be too conservative. All these things. Because people look back and say, well, they're just a little too conservative. They're a little too reserved. All these things. And so I want us to look today at 10 radical sayings of Jesus, and maybe radical because, well, they're contradictory to the way that we may see things and the way that we may understand them. Maybe more so they're radical to us, but maybe not to Jesus. And so when I was planning this sermon, and some knew that I was going to be out of town a little bit this weekend, as my brother was married in Weatherford, and we were there. I was told, all right, that means you get in late, might be a short sermon. I said, no, this is a 10-point sermon. But it's going to be a fast 10-point sermon, okay? So 10 rules, 10 radical sayings of Jesus. So first one, deny yourself and follow me. Luke 9:23. If anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me. Now, we may look at that and say, well, just how radical is that? How radical of a statement, because it's something that's natural to us. It's something we've heard over and over again, and we're aware of it, but just think about the implications of what Jesus is saying. Deny yourself and follow me. Walk away from your livelihood, he told the disciples, right? And follow after me. Give up everything that you know. Leave the land that you grew up in, Abram, and go to a land that I've got prepared for you. And I've got all these things in store for you. So he says, deny yourself and follow me. Become a servant. Looking at this says, but whoever would be great among you must be your servant, and whoever would be first among you, must be your slave, even as the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve and give his life as a ransom for many. Matthew chapter 20, 26 through 28. That the purpose of the Son. We rank things. We place people in certain orders, and even the disciples struggled with this, right? About the role of a servant and who a servant was supposed to be, and who Jesus was and who he was supposed to be. We've talked about this before, where Jesus, washes the disciples' feet, one of the greatest examples of this. And Peter has a problem with it, right? Because he said, this is the job of a servant, and you're not a servant, you're a rabbi, you're a master, you're a teacher, you are a leader, and this is not what you're supposed to be doing in our mind, in the way that we see it. And he says, listen, the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve. To serve. And so he says, become a servant. See, these aren't just too radical, are they? Gain the world. Well, how do you do it? Forfeit mine. If anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever would save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake and the gospel's will save it. For what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and forfeit his life? What can a man give in return for his life? For whoever is ashamed of me and of my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, of him will the Son of Man also be ashamed when he comes in his glory, in the glory of his Father with the holy angels. Mark chapter 8, 34 through 38. It's what do we seek to gain? What is it that matters the most to us? Are we seeking to gain all that this life has to offer? Are we seeking to fill ourselves with everything that this world can throw at us? Or are we willing to give of ourselves and surrender to him? Number 4, sell your stuff and give to the poor. And Jesus, looking at them, loved him and said to him, you lack one thing. Remember, he's talking to the rich man. Go sell all that you have and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven, and come follow me. You know, there's a theme in a lot of these. And come follow me. You know, it's what do we treasure? You know, there's a lot of things that I hold dear to. That if I would, and I'll just be honest with you, that if I was asked to give those things up, it would be difficult. And would be a struggle, you know, and I'm not talking about, you know, contrary to what some of my family may think, I'm not talking about my TV. Okay? I'm talking about some of those things that really mean a lot to us. Maybe those family heirlooms. Those things that define us. Explain who we are. At least in our eyes, right? He says, are you willing to give it all up? It's a good question. Are you willing to give it all up for me? Are you willing to, that if it's not there, what would you define? What would you be defined by? Are you willing to take that shot? Number 5, blessed are the persecuted. Blessed are you when people hate you and when they exclude you and revile you and spurn your name as evil on account of the Son of Man. You know, I love this verse because they seem very, a contradiction in terms, right? Because not all the time do we feel very blessed when we're persecuted. Not all the time that when we're having a bad day, when people are combative against us, when people are hurling insults at us, as it says, we're going through all those things, that every time, I don't know about you, when I experience this, I don't always sit back and say, man, am I blessed. You don't feel that way, do you? You don't have that expression. But a lot of it comes down to is in when we determine, when we go back and look and we see why or for what reason we experience these persecutions. What is behind it all? Is it because of maybe selfish gain and all these kind of things that we're trying to do to cause other people harm and people come back at us? Or is it because of our faith? Or is it because when we stand up for what we believe and we truly understand that God is going to provide for us, that God is going to look after us, that God is going to bless us, even in the midst of difficult times. You see, it's then that when we understand that when we are persecuted because of the name of Jesus, when we are persecuted because of our faith in Him, and we do not allow those words to tear us down, but we allow His words to dominate, to speak to us, to come into us, to speak louder than the noise of those who persecute us. That's when we realize there is blessing in persecution. There is blessing in these persecutions. So he says, do not be anxious. Do not be anxious about your life. Number 6. Therefore I tell you, do not be anxious about your life, what you will eat or what you will drink, nor about your body, what you will put on. Is not life more than food and the body more than clothing? You know, we can spend all day, every day, up to that moment in our life that we can finally feel that maybe we can slow down. We try to, we just get to this point that we just either need to build bigger barns or get more barns, right? We want to, and listen, I'm not saying it's wrong to make sure, to plan for life. It's not what I'm saying. But it's when we spend all day, every day, worried about having this and having that and storing all these kind of things up. And our goal is maybe in the midst of this as we maybe knock other people down, that when it's all about trying to make sure that we're good and no one else. Or when we have this lack of trust. Yeah, I know God says He's going to provide for us. I know God says He's going to do all these things, but is He really? Is everything really going to be okay? You know, as Gary talked about in his prayer, and it's very true, it just seems that as time goes on, we get further and further from the way things should be, or as often we say, the way things used to be. And so we can spend our whole life worrying, is God truly going to do this? Is God truly going to bless us? Is God truly going to provide for us in our most difficult moments? See, it's all in our perspective. It's all in the way we not just read God's Word, but it's in the way we hear it. You know, you see a lot of people, when you reach a certain age in life, a lot of people know Jesus. And I'm talking about know are aware, have heard the name, have heard other people talk about Jesus, but there's a difference in being aware of and in truly knowing. That's the whole point that in the books of the Old Testament, right? In the words of Moses, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God, the Lord is one." When He says, "Hear," that word Shema, that listen intently, listen in such a way that you don't just hear it, but you allow it to impact your life. He says, don't worry. God is going to provide for you. Hear Him time and time again. Number 7, not everyone enters the kingdom. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but the one who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. On that day, many will say to me, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name and cast out demons in your name and do many mighty works in your name? And then I will declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you workers of lawlessness. You know, this is one of those verses that really kind of stirs something up inside of me. I don't know about you. See, it's not just so much to say the name of the Lord. Just as we were just talking about, it's not just so much to be aware of or to know Jesus, to be alerted to His name in the history of humanity. It's not just so much that. Because, you know, a lot of us can say a lot of good things and can sound like Christians. But ultimately, who are we? Who are we deep down inside? Number 8, fear God. And do not fear those who kill the body but cannot kill the soul. Rather, fear Him who can destroy both soul and body in hell. And that kind of goes along the lines of not everyone will enter the kingdom. Many are going to call on the name of Jesus. And He says, who do you fear? You fear man or do you fear God? Number 9, the exalted will be humbled. Whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and whoever humbles himself will be exalted. It's that position, it's that pride in that position, it's that understanding that He is God and we are not. Right? I've always been told there's 2 things I'm aware of. There's a God and I'm not here. Right? That when we humble ourselves in His presence, just that depiction, that picture that John gives us in Revelation, as they are surrounding the throne, bowing down, singing, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty, who was, and is to come." Now this last one, number 10. See, we made it to number 10. This last one has been one that I think that we have found a little difficult to understand, because it seems as Jesus calling for something so literal. But he says to what? Hate your family. So, let's read the verse. Hear the end. All right? He says, if anyone comes to me and does not hate his own father and mother and wife and children and brothers and sisters, yes, even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. Now let me tell you this. This verse is not telling us that Jesus calls us to literally hate everyone. To hate everyone in our life, all these kind of things. The Greek word here is meseo, and what it means is to love less. Alright? It means to love less. In comparison to, that when we compare our father, our mother, our brothers, our sisters, our family to God, he says we are to love them less than God. He didn't say we're not to love them at all. Right? It's where do we place God in the midst of this? Because you see, at just the right time when we were still powerless, Christ died for the ungodly. And what he gives us in the midst of this is really 10 radical rules for Christian living. Deny yourself and follow me. Become a servant. Gain the world, forfeit life. Sell your stuff and give to the poor. Be blessed as the persecuted. Don't be anxious about your life. Not everyone enters the kingdom, so fear God and exalt and understand that the exalted will be humbled and have a love more greater for God. 10 radical rules for Christian living. 10 ways for us to understand what it means to be a child of God. And as we think about these rules, as we think about what it means to follow this, what we understand is because of the sacrifice of Jesus, we're called to live in a different way. We're called to live in a new way, not according to the standards of this world like we talked about last week, right? Not conforming to this life, but being transformed, but allowing His commands, His directions, that everything that He says, what it means to truly follow me. We understand this, and we are passionate about this. And we live this out because of His sacrifice for us. And our response to this is this. Follow Him. Trust Him. Know that He will not lead you astray. And like I said, maybe they're more radical to us than they are to you. Let's pray. Father God, we thank you. God, we thank you for the opportunity, God, that we have to listen to your word, God, to read your word and to be called out of maybe some things, God, that we've allowed ourselves to get caught up in. To be able to experience freedom from the ways of this world, God, and to surrender our lives to you, to trust in you. God, we know that it is when we do this, we know that it is when we follow after your example, when we follow that, as Harvey spoke earlier, that pattern of teaching, that God, we are led to something greater. And in many ways, it's a greater appreciation of that sacrifice for us. So God, we want to live for you. We want to follow you. We want to not just say that we trust you, but we want to show it by every step we take. It's in your Son's name that we pray. Where are your steps taking you? That's the question we need to ask. It's a question that's asked because of the sacrifice of Jesus. And it then calls us to live in a new way. Oh, and there's more than 10. We just didn't spit all of them. Right? We could go through a while. So I want to challenge you. Look at the teachings of Jesus. Look at His words. See where they call you to do and to be. So where are your next steps taking you? To the waters of baptism? To humble yourselves before Him and ask for prayers of your brothers and your sisters here, where are your next steps taken? We'll find out as we stay here.